you have an understanding of nervous and sensory systems, but one system that can override everything else is actually your endocrine system. And we work with your endocrine system and your nervous system together to maintain homeostasis within your body, so controlling nutrients and salt and water, as well as things like growth and reproduction. The endocrine system is made up of glands that are composed of epithelial cells, and we look at two different types of glands. We have an endocrine gland, which is going to deliver hormones to your circulatory system simply through secretion. We can also look at what we call exocrine glands. So exo is out, or in this case, we look at exo being associated with ducts or tubes that are going to directly deliver whatever that gland makes to the organ or target tissue. So these will be associated with things like digestive enzymes that are delivered straight to your stomach or small intestine. And we often look at this entire system being involved in regulating the uptake and feedback of nutrients in negative and positive feedback systems. So how do we actually regulate? It's all based in hormones. The entire system is going to work with the nervous system to regulate everything in your body, including communication and regulation itself, so increasing or decreasing nutrients, increasing or decreasing vitamins, hormones, and so on. But much of what we look at is the functions between endocrine and nervous systems are very similar. The nervous system uses electrical signals that we've talked about in nerve cells. The endocrine system is going to use hormones or chemical signals produced in these endocrine glands and typically transported around your body through the cardiovascular system. These hormones will have very specific target cells. So the cells that the hormones are going to target have to have receptors for that hormone or for that chemical release. The difference is the nervous system tends to act much faster. We are often responding very quickly to things in the environment or things in your internal system. The responses of the endocrine system last much longer. So you might release a hormone through something that we look at as being necessary for growth or development, and those are hormones that are going to act over a very long period of time. They're going to cause cascading effects or pathway effects throughout your entire body. We don't look at the nervous system as having a long-term effect on your system. When we look at hormones in vertebrates, we've got two different major types. One is hydrophilic, are amino acid based hormones, or you know these more as proteins or peptides, or the steroid based hormones. So these are all based in cholesterol, so they're going to be hydrophobic. This is going to be important for us, whether these hormones are fat soluble or water soluble. That determines how long they're going to last in your system. Most of the time we look at these hormones traveling through your bloodstream, as we said, either the protein-based or the steroid-based, but their prolonged effects, how long are they going to last? How long are they going to target those cells? How long will they get recycled in the system? All has to do with whether or not they are those protein or steroid-based hormones. We have to keep in mind that regardless of their underlying structure, the target cell receptors are going to bind that hormone, and it will only act on that cell once it is bound. It can't act until then. So we have to have this reception or this idea of binding the hormone, there has to be some sort of signal transduction or some pathway that hormone is going to initiate, and then there's going to be some sort of response. We have seen this before in negative and positive feedback systems. When we look at negative feedback systems, we look at the outcome as a regulator. Remember, our product that we made in a pathway would actually shut down the system. We saw this in calcium cycles, we saw this in glucose cycles, we see this all over the place. And we'll look at it a couple of more times just to give you a better sense of it. Positive feedback is where the outcome is actually going to increase the rate or the process. So here we look at the outcome actually driving this process to go faster and faster, more and more, rather than stopping the process as we see with negative feedback. Remember, the example we gave you with positive feedback is childbirth and oxytocin. And now I will show you that again. The only thing that can override the endocrine system, normally they work together, but the nervous system can override everything that's going on with your endocrine system if you are in a fight or flight kind of response. Do you have an emergency that you have to deal with? Then if you're doing any normal maintenance homeostasis kinds of activities with these hormones, it's not going to matter. We actually need the nervous system to take over and do what needs to be done. With a negative feedback system, remember, we have some sort of hormone that's produced that goes back and actually shuts off the functioning or inhibits the functioning of these other glands, in this case, that would release hormones. So if we have a target gland, typically something like, say, the thyroid, the production of the hormones by the thyroid actually build up and will shut off the stimulating hormones that come from the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus. In oxytocin, in our positive feedback example, the idea here is your hypothalamus is going to signal the posterior pituitary to release oxytocin, and it will continue to do that until after the child is born, and actually until after all of the birthing process is over, and then oxytocin levels will go back down. The idea here is oxytocin is responsible for uterine contractions. We don't want birth to stop in the middle. There are a couple of types of hormones. We mentioned the idea that exocrine hormones are released into ducts. Typically, we look at these as being enzymes. So digestive, saliva, oils, digestive enzymes, all of those fit into this exocrine category. Endocrine are released by diffusion into the bloodstream typically and are part of usually negative feedback loops. And when we look at these fall under what we call antagonistic control. So if something is antagonistic, it fights against, right? So when we look at endocrine hormones, we look typically at paired hormones that one will cause an increase and one will cause a decrease in particular functioning. There are non-endocrine hormones as well. So these are cells or organs that are going to release hormones but are not technically part of your endocrine system, such as your stomach. It's certainly going to release hormones and enzymes, but it is not technically part of the endocrine system, so it fits into this non-endocrine category. We have two specialized endocrine glands that don't really have another place. We've talked about the thymus gland before, very much associated with your immune response and the production of T cells. The pineal gland is associated with the secretion of melatonin. And in this case, we're actually going to be relying on it to link external and internal environments. So your wake and sleep cycle is very much regulated by melatonin, but it's triggered by sunlight. So we're going to need that interaction for this gland to do its job properly.